If you read last week's reading, it's the reading of Bereshit, Genesis. It speaks about God creating the world. And the objective of creation was for the sake of mankind. And Adam and Eve were the first creations of God as human beings. And they were given a challenge. What was the challenge, the test? You're permitted to eat from any tree of the garden. However, there's one tree which you should not eat of, the tree of knowledge, because the fruit of that tree represents good and evil. And if you ingest that fruit, you're going to become impacted negatively by that evil. And if that's the case, you're not that pure being that I created. And it's a whole different reality of challenge till the end of eternity. So if Adam initially would have succeeded and not eat, he would have achieved perfection and the world would have been eternal. But because he chose to eat of the tree, for whatever reason, his wife offered it to him, his wife was seduced by the serpent, by the snake in the Garden of Eden, they were driven out of the Garden of Eden. This is what happened. But there was no question. Adam and Eve were prophets. What's a prophet? A prophet is somebody God communicates to. They were created, put in the Garden of Eden. There was no question who the creator was, who the omnipotent being was. It's God. They're driven out. What is idolatry? What exactly is idolatry? Do they believe in the piece of stone, in the piece of wood, piece of gold? What exactly is idolatry? What do they believe? We'll see. The ancient pagans, they believed, and they only believed this is according to Rav Chaim Volozhiner, because they had such a grasp of God, that God is this infinite being, and he's the creator. God creates, but God is not at the level to maintain the minutiae of existence. So what did he do? He created the world as the creator, and he created spiritual powers, which are called angels, or they're called deities, spiritual powers, and he handed over the control of existence to these deities, to these powers. And these powers now independent of God. God removed himself from this existence totally, because God is a creator. He's not a maintainer. Doesn't maintain existence. He creates, leaves creation, and he has his other things to do. Who maintains creation? These angels, which are referred to as deities. And you have to hone up to these angels, to these deities, if you want them to accommodate and respond to your needs. And you got to worship them, even to give your life to them, to that degree. Lahavdil, as a Jew is obligated to give his life for God, it's very specific instances which God dictates us when and when not. Identically, you have to show your subservience to these deities, and once you're subservient to them, even to give your life, human sacrifice, they will respond to your request, to your needs. They will protect you against your enemies. That's where idolatry began. That's the origin of idolatry, because they had an understanding of who God was, that he's infinite. He has this unlimited ability. He gave it over to multiple powers that they oversee existence. He no longer is involved in overseeing existence. That's the concept. When did it start? Adam had two sons, Adam and Eve. The oldest son, his name was Cain. In Hebrew, is known as Cain. The second son, his name was Hevel, Abel, Cain and Abel. Torah tells a story that they got into some kind of disagreement. Cain rises up, kills his brother Abel. And God comes to Cain, it says, where's your brother? So Cain himself, God is communicating with him. So if God communicates with him, that means he's the equivalent of a prophet. He's at a level God still communicates with him, although he already committed murder. And he asks a question. Where is your brother Abel? Where is he? So he says to God, am I my brother's keeper? How am I supposed to still? Am I my brother's keeper? Meaning he believed that somehow he could hoodwink God, even though God's the creator, but he's not fully aware of what's going on in existence. You're able to sideswipe God, sidestep him, and he has certain blind spots. I'll give you an example. Rav Chaim Volozhin explains, if you have a tool maker, a gun maker, and he creates a weapon, the moment he creates that weapon, even the tool maker, the gun maker, is not safe from that weapon. If a third party has that weapon in his hand, he could actually eliminate the tool maker, the gun maker. But you created the weapon. You made the weapon. Without your ingenuity, that weapon couldn't come back. Doesn't make a difference. But if it's in the hands of the wrong party, that third party could take the life of the one who created that gun, who developed that gun. So Cain believed, although God's the creator, but once he created the world, he's not fully involved in understanding what's going on in this world. So if God says to him, where's your brother? He thought he could say, am I my brother's keeper? How am I supposed to know? So what does God say to him? The bloods of your brother are calling out to me. Meaning, I'm fully aware you're a murderer. You murdered your brother. And the reason it says bloods means, Rashi cites the Midrash, that all the generations that would have been born from your brother, all those generations are calling out that they're not going to be. Because since you murdered him at this point, before he had children, all those future generations are denied existence. And you're at fault. You denied them coming into existence. That's what God said to Cain. What happens? Adam, to atone for the eating of the tree of knowledge, he separated from his wife for 130 years. He did not engage with her, cohabit with her for 130 years. He did tshuva, as we have in the Rambam. What does a person who's a penitent, what does he do? What does he do? He goes into exile. He goes into seclusion. He reflects on the wrong that he had done and repents. After 130 years, he comes back to his wife and they have a child. The child's name is Seth. Shais was a tzaddik, was a real tzaddik. Shem, who we descend, Avram Avinu, Abraham, our patriarch, comes from Shem. He descended from Seth. Seth was a tzaddik. Now, who was the first one to introduce idolatry to this existence? Seth was devout. He was literally in the image of his father, Adam. And yet, Seth has a son. His son's name is Enosh. Enosh. And Enosh introduces idolatry to existence. Could you imagine? Cain was the murderer. Cain who believes he could hoodwink God. He's not the idolater. He doesn't introduce idolatry to existence. Enosh, who's the son of Seth, who's the ultimate tzaddik, he stands in the shoes of his father, and he believes in monotheism. There's no such thing as the world was given over to deities, the hosts of heaven. His son should be the one contrive the concept of paganism. How's it possible? Being raised in such a devout home with such clear beliefs, no ifs or buts. Why did he introduce idolatry? But he's the one. But based on what we said, it's very logical. It makes sense. It follows. Why? Cain was one thing. He was a murderer. His children were weapon makers. He couldn't care less. God does exist. God doesn't exist. All he wanted was a bigger piece of the pie. The disagreement between him and his brother was, who is the heir to existence? Our parents are the only human beings. The world is theirs. If there's two of us, that means we got to divide the pie. If there's one of us, the pie is all mine. That was the basis for the fight between the two of them. Cain wanted to come up with an excuse to eliminate his brother, that he should be the total master of existence on the terrestrial level. That's what he wanted. So to him, it didn't make a difference. God, not God. Does God know everything? Does he know everything? As we say, the power is in your arm. You become God, and that's where it begins, that's where it ends. Shais, on the other hand, he raised his son Enosh in a very devout home. Everything is God and God and God. God is this infinite being. God encompasses everything. God is the creator. But you want to know something? Enosh had a problem. If God is that, how does he lower himself and be involved in the minutiae of existence? Whether your bodily functions work or they don't work, or whether the kennel has been sanitized so the dog doesn't catch some kind of hoof and mouth disease, from who knows who. That's God's issues. You think God's busy with this? This is something for what? For the lower echelon, which are called angels. Those are the deities. It's not for God. So because he understood who God was, therefore, to take the next step, that God's involved in this existence, he couldn't accept it. So therefore, the only thing that made sense to him was the deities. You have the hosts of heaven, and God gave over that control to them, that they should maintain existence. That's the concept. The only species that exists in this existence, living species, that has the power of choice, that could override the system. Human beings also are instinctive, but our function is not limited to instinct. Many areas of our life, it's what we choose to do. I mean, the body functions, the heart beats, the systems work. We have no control. I mean, you could terminate those systems by choice, but if you let them be and you maintain them, you eat and you nourish yourself and you hydrate, so they'll function. But your choice doesn't make them function. That's natural. But the many things we do in our lives, they only happen because we choose to do them. If we wouldn't choose to do them, they wouldn't come about. Our behavior patterns. You do good or you do evil. You have to take initiative to do good, and God forbid us not to take initiative to do evil. So good and evil, an animal, whatever it does, even if it kills, because that's the way it lives, it has no control over its existence. That's who it was created. You have a predator animal. It kills to live. That's what it is. Now, if a person, why did God create this world? What's the objective of mankind? What's his value? Why do we exist? Because God wanted the human being to be the ultimate beneficiary of goodness. And what is that? Being able to partake of what? Of the ultimate goodness. I'll give you an example. I say to Larry, he's into smoothies, into all this kind of stuff, only healthy stuff. No insecticides. Everything is pure, natural. And I said to him, Larry, I'll give you enough warehouses of this kind of food with books on all this health that you could live for another 1,000 years. But Larry, he'd be smiling beyond ear to ear. I gave him everything. That's what it's all about. But is that really goodness? That's not the ultimate good. What's ultimate good? If God himself is absolute in every sense of the word, having a relation with him and being able to cleave to him, that is what we call the ultimate jackpot. That's the ultimate success. That's the ultimate pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. But you got to be worthy. You have to earn it. How do you earn it? God gives you challenges. If you choose, despite your inclination, to go negative, you go positive. So the reason why you're positive is because you chose to go positive. You're deserving. But let's say a person will naturally do good. Naturally, you have no control, like the animal has no control. It's all determined by instinct, instinctive behavior. The action is not attributed to yourself. It's like a robot. You wind up a robot, the robot functions based on what you put in the robot. A human being is not a robot. A human being is an independent being who makes choices. So if I choose to do good, why does that good exist? Because I created that good through my initiative, because I could have done differently. And if I choose to do evil, why does the evil exist? Because I chose to do evil. So that evil is attributed to the person, as the good is attributed to the person when you choose to do good. So it's only because it's attributed to us, are we deserving of what? Of the relationship with God to be part of the ultimate good, to have that relation with him. This is the concept of creation. That's why man was given a choice. But every choice we're given, we have the ability to succeed and make the right choice. If we fail, we chose to fail. Because there's an obvious question which I asked, which Larry almost articulated a question. There's a Torah violation. You're not permitted to put a stumbling block before a blind man. Meaning, I'll give you an example. A person has very serious diabetic problem, and you offer him food, and you know the man has a ravenous appetite, and you offer him food that if he eats that food, he'll go into diabetic shock. What did you do? You took the man's life. You put a stumbling block behind a man. He has no control, almost no control of his behavior. He's going to fail. So you create a setting, you put his life into jeopardy. God says, you're not permitted to put a stumbling block before your fellow. Because since man is inclined to do the wrong thing, you're creating a setting, he may fail. So you could ask the question, what about God himself? God created a setting. That's the whole challenge. Why is that putting a stumbling block before every one of us? When we have temptation. You know why? Because when God puts the temptation before us, he knows that we have the ability to succeed and not succumb to temptation. That's why it's not a stumbling block. But when a third party puts that stumbling block before you, you don't know whether he has that ability, the capacity to succeed or not. So for the mortal to put the stumbling block before his fellow, you're creating a problem which he may not be able to deal with that problem. Therefore, you're held accountable if he does fail. However, when God puts the stumbling block, it's not a stumbling block, it's an opportunity, it's a challenge, which God gave him the means and the ability to succeed in that challenge. Therefore, if you succeed, it's your success for that reason. That's all. Make your comment. Good.
Hashem is not Hashem giving man the choice to follow his inappropriate desires when he
I said
decides
the challenges. When God gives you a challenge and you create your own challenge. Of course, you have the ability to do a thing because God allows you to do it. He wills you should be able to do it. Right? To march to your own drum. That's, of course, God. But what we call a challenge. Could you meet the challenge? Could you not meet the challenge? If God gives you the challenge, that's one thing. And the challenges, regardless, you could be at the highest level. Everybody has challenges at his own level. You know, sometimes you have to make 25 mistakes before you come to a point where it's no longer God's challenge. Up to a certain point, God's still challenging you. You cross a certain line at a certain point, now you've gone too far. Because God never wanted you to arrive at that point. That's no longer God's challenge. You created that challenge yourself. I'll give you an example. many years ago, policemen, I'm talking in the 50s, early 60s, a policeman, it was called he walked the beat. He was outside in the winter. You ever see the old New York City police uniforms? Thick woolen, like tunic he wore, even the coat with his badge that was somehow embedded in that coat. And he walked with his club and he walked up and down and who knows where he was, and he froze throughout the winter. They came all of a sudden, we have cars. They're gonna patrol in cars. So you had 2 male policemen patrolling cars. They had the night shift, the day shift, this and that. Then they say, something. I think women are going to join the police force. That one policeman should be a man, one woman, one policeman should be a woman. They realized afterwards it wasn't the healthiest thing. For a man and woman to be in the same car, and there's many hours you have to talk about many things. And if you get too close to the fire, you get burnt. And it created all kinds of problems. But the more society became permissive, it was less of a problem. Because it wasn't a breach of values, because that became the value. At one time, people only engaged in that if they were married, not if they were single. But that created a setting that people were violating certain ethics and morals which shouldn't have been violated, creating that setting. So anybody who has any sense going in the car and spending 40 hours a week with the opposite sex in the car, endless hours where you could all be by yourself, and something, it's like the challenge is don't go in the car, turn down the job or take a different beat or whatever it is. So God gave you the challenge. Once you went in and you're agreeable to assume that level of responsibility as a policeman and have this co-worker with you of the opposite sex, you're doomed for disaster.
It's funny what we. Oh, sorry, I finished recording. It's just funny what humans can do to justify their actions or to allow, certain behaviors that they know it's a slippery slope until they cross the line that is completely forbidden. So I think it's like us putting up guardrails because we know thyself. And if you know that you have a certain inclination for the opposite sex or for this and that, the diabetic example for specific foods, you need to, like you said, it's no longer a challenge once you get to the thing. You need to create as much separation from the inciting agent as you can in the first place.
Person says, I won every award, every medal for swimming, even the gold medal. Does that mean I could drop you in the middle of the ocean where the closest land is 3,000 miles away, shark-infested waters? Do you think you're going to survive that in the middle of winter? I'll meet that challenge. Something? Are you out of your mind? You're totally deluding yourself. You're a state of delusion. People delude themselves at certain points. Well, I'm made of steel. I'm faithful to who knows what, to his wife. But you want to know something? But you put your hand in the fire, you get burnt. There's no such thing as going into the fire, you don't get burnt. It's a reality.